while we can't be in person, which would be just absolutely lovely, I'm glad we can be together virtually to talk about something that is important to all of us. And that is the idea that we lift up the students and we make sure that the programs that we offer challenge them and give them a chance to really achieve the kind of excellence that we know that they're capable of. My role here today is to tell you about the honors program at Swarthmore College. Before I tell you about the program, I'm going to tell you about Swarthmore itself. And I'm thanking Mark in advance for advancing my slides because I couldn't see my own slides when I tried to share my screen earlier. So Mark, if you would go to the first slide or the second slide. So this is a bit of information about Swarthmore College. You can also find it on the link that's on the bottom left-hand corner. We were founded during the American Civil War as a coeducational college by the Society of Friends, or people we know as Quakers, the people who are conflict averse and who wanted to make peace. These were the same Quakers who wrote the papers about the abolition of slavery that first were adopted in the UK and then later on in the US. And in the US today, we have a small celebration of the legislature in the US finally doing some actual work and passing a national holiday called Juneteenth, which was the actual, not when slaves were liberated by legislation, but actually when the final group of slaves in Texas were notified that they had been freed 2 years ago. So that's a new national holiday for us, and one that I think recognizes, the history of the country in a new way. So this is a private 4-year college with no graduate degrees, only bachelor's degrees. Those small liberal arts colleges are also kind of an American invention. And the mission of the college is to really help students fully realize their intellectual potential. And one of the things, and to do so in combination with a deep sense of society and ethics of society. And so I teach science. You can learn science and you can learn the facts, but how you apply them depends on the ethics and the morale of the society and its needs. We have a beautiful campus. If you ever come anywhere close to the Philadelphia area, let me know. I'll give you a tour of the campus. We work in a garden and in a park. And we are associated with 2 other small liberal arts colleges in the area, Bryn Mawr and Haverford colleges, as well as the University of Pennsylvania. Some of you may have heard of that wonderful institution. They're also the Quakers, and they have full graduate programs, medical school, business school and all that. Next slide, please. Oh, the other way. There we go. And this is a little bit of summary of the academic experience of the college. The fact that we have an honors program, which is the subject of my presentation. We have about just under 200 full-time faculty, and the student to faculty ratio is an average of 8-to-1. Now, I happen to teach classes that are larger than that, but I also teach classes that are smaller than 8-to-1, and so that's the average. And about 2/3 of our students participate in summer research, mostly in sciences and engineering, but also in social sciences and humanities. And we think it's really important that students gain experience doing research. Next slide. Next slide, please, Mark. This is just some numbers. We have slightly less than, this is numbers from last year. Slightly fewer than 1,700 students, evenly divided in terms of gender. And the schools, the secondary schools from which our students come are mostly public schools, but also independent. We have about 10% international schools, and then parochial schools tend to be run by the Catholic Church. Next slide, please. This is just the breakdown of kind of racial and ethnic identities based on the United States government categories, but you can see we have a number of international students as well. But we've had a minority of white students, I think, at least for 10 years. Next slide, please. And we are in the category of highly selective schools. You can see that the number of applicants we had for the incoming class 2 years ago, I think we had over 16,000 students apply for this last round, and the entering class is around 400 to 425. Next slide, please. And people always ask me about tuition. These numbers are slightly out of date, but you can get a sense of the cost for tuition, and that need-based financial aid is made after admission, so we are a need-blind admissions process. We have no idea the financial needs of anyone when they apply. It is only after we accept them and they accept us back that the financial aid calculus begins. And so over half of our students receive a great deal of aid. Next slide, please. And this is just looks at what students do after graduation. These percentages are a little confusing. The first two basically add up to near 100%. So students tend to do some work, and then many of them decide to return to graduate school within 5 years. If you apply to medical school, either as a current student who is about to graduate or someone who's been out in the workforce and now wants to go to medical school, of those applicants, 87% are accepted into medical school. And we are the third highest percent contributor to people in graduate programs in the United States. That includes MIT and Caltech and all kinds of schools like that. Next slide, please. And then this was just something about our budget. We are fortunate to be a well-endowed school, and we have excellent financial managers. And so unlike some other small liberal arts colleges, we certainly took a hit in terms of our budget during the pandemic, but we didn't close like many smaller schools. So we're very grateful for that. Next slide, please. I just wanted to give you a sense of Swarthmore before I talk about the honors program. So we have the oldest honors program in the United States, and it was modeled after the Oxford tutorial program. And I'm sure many of you know about that. But what's unique about our program, many colleges and universities in the United States have honors programs, but our honors programs relies entirely on external examination. And what I mean by that is if you graduate from Swarthmore College with an honorific, it is not because the faculty decided that you were to do that, but it's a bunch of people from the outside whom we delegate that to. And so that keeps us honest about the integrity of our program. Frank Adelot was a president of Swarthmore who 60 years after it was founded was worried that people really hadn't heard about Swarthmore, and was also worried about how we compared with other institutions in the United States. And so he came up with the honors program. He thought it was a way to ensure that what we were teaching was actually of high quality. For example, I am the only microbiologist on the Swarthmore campus. I'm in the Department of Biology, but we have one microbiologist, one plant physiologist, one animal physiologist, kind of one of each. And so if nobody were paying attention, I could teach basket weaving, call it microbiology, and I might fly under some radar somewhere. And so if I invite a microbiologist from another institution to come and examine my students, and they give my students the thumbs up, then I'm assuming that means the quality of the course I taught was okay. On the other hand, if I have 3 or 4 honors students and none of them pass the honors exam, I am the one who failed. And so that really ensures the quality of a program in a way that I believe is quite unique. Also, by inviting others from other institutions to come to Swarthmore and to interact with our students, and I'll tell you more about the logistics in a little bit, we are advertising our best and brightest students to the external world. Some of these individuals are heads of graduate admissions committees. Some of these individuals might sit on fellowship committees, right? Or eventually read grant proposals that these young scholars will submit. And so the quality of that becomes advertised to the outside. The original honor system was much more cumbersome and happened in times where students didn't have other options to go abroad and other things. And so our honors program has undergone renovation twice. Very thoughtful, deliberate, slow process. And each time it was appropriate for the time. Next slide, please. So I'll give you some recent numbers in a little bit, but the Swarthmore faculty invite external examiners. And there's all kinds of rules about that I'll tell you about. And the examiners have the sole responsibility of awarding the only honorifics that students can graduate from Swarthmore with: honors, highest honors, which are equivalent to cum laude, summa cum laude, and magna cum laude. Next slide, please. All right, here's the recent numbers. So you can see from years 2008 to 2020, we have between, I would say, 80 and 150 students are participating in honors. 2020 was a particularly low year. We had usually 90 or 100 students every year. When 2020 came around, there are a number of students who took leave, did not finish, or dropped out of the honors program because of their learning situations. But you can also see that the number of students who graduate with highest honors tends to be a small percent, just as it is in a kind of magna cum laude situation in your institutions. The majority of students graduate with high honors, and most of the other students earn honors. And every other year, there might be a student who gets a pass. That student will graduate, but will not graduate with an honorific. When that happens, it's very rare. Often it happens because of students' kind of mental health issues. We try to stay ahead of that at school, but occasionally a student just doesn't want to go through with it. They absolutely graduate from the college, but they just don't graduate with an honorific. Next slide, please. So this last year and this year, we adapted and put the honors program in a virtual environment. 2020, as you all know, was kind of an emergency type of teaching, but in 2021, we had all year to plan and all year to support students in honors. And this particular set of photos comes from our website, where we actually put that out on our website and showed how we adapted to virtual honors. And you can see the students who were studying together. Juniors and seniors were allowed on campus for the spring semester, and so this is obviously a group of them who were clustered with some classmates who were still remote, so a hybrid classroom. President Valerie Smith did a lot to make sure that the honors program was not interrupted. Some people just wanted to say, no, let's just cancel it. And she said, no, this is important to the integrity of our program and to the students who had been preparing for a couple of years for this. Next slide, please. So this past year that we just completed saw a real drop with students receiving honors. Only 61 of them participated. We had, I don't know how many students defer a year, just take a whole year off. And a number of those were students who were working toward honors. There were written examinations that were administered in 23 different subjects across the curricula. We had over 250 oral exams scheduled, and we involved 141 external examiners from all over the globe. We could, because we didn't need to fly them in, they all participated on Zoom, and it worked out to be very well. Next slide, please. So here's the format. A student who wants to work toward honors has to apply. And in the application, and the application for honors takes place in the spring of the second year. So in the United States, we have 4 years: freshman, first year, sophomore year, junior year, and senior year. And in the spring of the sophomore year is when students apply for honors. They also apply for majors. You don't just declare your major. Departments accept you into the major when you satisfy certain criteria. At Swarthmore, you're either an honors major or you're a course major. And a course major is just a regular degree with no honorific, no chance for an honorific. So in an honors application, a student would already have needed to be accepted as a course major and then proposes 4 preparations. 3 preparations in the major, so for example, biology, and 1 preparation in a minor, and the minor field can be anything. Your minor does not have to be related to your major. So I had one student who was a biology major and a chemistry minor, and another student who was a biology major and an English minor, and another student who was a biology major and a dance minor. So they do not have to be related. A major preparation, the preparations in the major are either 3 seminars or 2 seminars and a thesis. Now, a seminar is a course that is organized by a faculty member and represents advanced coursework. And in that course, students do most of the presentations. They write papers and do oral presentations. A thesis is a thesis. It's based on a body of research, and I'll have more to say about the thesis in a little bit. So you have 3 preparations in your major, and you have 1 preparation in your minor. And so, for example, my English minor had a preparation in Shakespeare. All right. The student of mine who was a dance minor had a particular dance interest in the kind of the anthropology of a particular type of Indian dance. And the chemistry major had his preparation in biochemistry. Next slide, please. So the seminar. The seminar involves deep reading of scholarly work in the field. All right. These include classic texts in your field of study. So my preparation, my seminar is in an advanced microbiology seminar. For that seminar, students have already taken introductory biology, my intermediate microbiology course with a lab. Some of them they've all taken general chemistry and organic chemistry, and I recommend that they take also biochemistry. So they're bringing quite a bit of knowledge already into this seminar. For my seminar, there are no texts. We are reading primary literature. We're reading the research literature that's been published in peer-reviewed journals, some classic papers, as well as recent papers. Students read and learn to think critically about these works, and then they write their own summaries of the papers they're presenting. They take turns. Not every student presents orally every week, but they take turns presenting their papers to their classmates. Their classmates challenge them. There's intense discussion. There's a lot of really healthy disagreement and challenge, and let's go back and look at those data again. And I really work as a facilitator. I facilitate inclusive discussion so that no one hides and no one is silent and no one dominates the discussion. And that's sometimes a challenge, all right? And then I provide feedback on the student papers because they turn in their written work to me. I often start the semester off with a couple of foundational reviews to make sure everyone coming in is on the same page, but then I very quickly turn the class time over to students. A thesis in biology is a research that's mentored by a Swarthmore faculty member. And in biology, it is laboratory or field-based research. In some other fields, it is library-based research on an original thesis. And for that, students have Swarthmore faculty mentors. Next slide, please. Students usually are taking their seminars in their junior or senior years, and every seminar has important prerequisite courses. And so this is why the planning has to start taking place the spring of the sophomore year, the spring of the second year, so that the proper sequence of courses can be arranged so that students arrive ready to take on those advanced seminars. Departments have to approve of all honor majors and minors, and students have to maintain a minimum of performance while they're going through their sophomore and junior years, or the department can disapprove them from the honors program. A student can also choose to drop honors, and the official drop date is December 1st. But I have supported students who have dropped later than that date for family reasons, and the college has supported those decisions. It's just that we start inviting our colleagues to become examiners starting in on December 2nd and 3rd because they're busy people. And so that is the reason we have that deadline. Next slide, please. In biology, we also have the option of letting students do their research elsewhere. So for example, I'm retiring in a year, and so I moved to a new building, and I actually moved my lab and get it all set up. I'm going to teach in it, but I've actually closed my research lab. I had a terrific student, and I really almost opened my lab back up for him because he was so promising. But we found him a summer research position for 2 summers in a row, actually at UC Berkeley in Jennifer Doudna's lab. And I was his faculty liaison, so that I communicated with the Doudna lab, the postdoc in the lab who mentored him, talking about his work, making sure that he wasn't just a glorified dishwasher in the lab supporting someone else, but he had his own little project. And that we secured funding for him, and that the lab supported him with resources while they were in the lab. Unfortunately for this poor kid, he spent 1 summer in the lab. The second summer, he spent, yes, 1 summer in the lab, and the second summer was the pandemic. So he spent that summer doing a very thorough literature review that would not have been required for his thesis, but because he couldn't return to the lab, he analyzed his data and also wrote an extensive literature review for the introduction part of his thesis. So when it was time for me to invite the external examiner, obviously the Doudna lab is working on viruses. I consulted with their lab and found someone who is has written a textbook about viruses, but also teaches at a small college, and asked her to be the external examiner. I wanted to make sure this was someone who was not a competitor of the Doudna lab or who was too close a collaborator with the Doudna lab. Either way, those kinds of connections are not allowed in external examiner selection. Next slide, please. So every preparation has its own external examiner. And if I have 4 students all taking my advanced seminar, I will invite one examiner to examine all 4 of these students. If I have a thesis student, I will choose a different examiner to examine that thesis. So each honors student will have 4 different honors examiners, external examiners, because they have 4 preparations. The exams are given in the spring of the senior year. And so even if you took a seminar as a first semester junior, you have to kind of do some rereading and studying in the spring of your senior year to ready yourself for that exam. For a seminar, what I do is I send my examiner my reading list, the list of all the papers the students have read and discussed. And that reading list is the same for, let's say, all 4 of the students who are being examined in my seminar. They may not have presented every single paper, but they were there in the class listening, and so all of those papers are raw material for the examination. The external examiner then takes that reading list and writes an exam. The exam is sent to me in early April. I look it over and make some suggestions. For example, I think this exam is too long, or I think if you gave the students 4 questions and asked them to answer 3 of the 4, something like that. But I don't really comment on the content. Then the examination is given to the students during finals. All right. And then that examiner will provide an oral exam for each of the students as a follow-up. Any thesis that is written is sent to the examiner. As the faculty mentor, all I can do is be kind of a copy editor, if you will, for the paper, but the paper is written by the student themselves. That thesis is sent at the end of the spring semester, and the examiner readies themselves for an oral exam with the student. Next slide, please. So written exams are administered by the college. Students can either write the answer out longhand, pen and paper. Students really aren't accustomed to writing for 3 hours anymore. So 99% of them take the exam on computer, but these computers are not connected to anything except by a cable to a printer in the room. So they're not connected at all to the Wi-Fi or to the internet. Most exams are closed book. Occasionally, a faculty member and an examiner will agree that students can bring certain books to the exam, and that is the list that the honors proctor, the exam proctors know about. Right after the exam is finished, the students are, the open book exams are open hard copy exams. I'm not aware of any kind of a student support that would require it to be a PDF. If it were a PDF, the student would have a separate computer that had only the PDF on it that was not, again, able to be connected to the internet. The examiners immediately receive the copy of the exam digitally. The student also walks away with a copy of their exam answers. The faculty member do not see the answers to the exam until basically after graduation. So we are completely in the dark about how we know what the questions were. We have no idea which questions the students answered, and we have no idea what the answers were. Okay, so the oral exam for that seminar is a 45-minute individual oral with the student and the examiner. The thesis oral exam is 60 minutes. Okay, next slide, please. Up until 2020, all the oral exams were conducted. And so honors weekend is this festive, amazing end of year celebration. We're at the airport picking up about 150 people, or some of them are local, so they drive in. We put them up on campus. It's a gastronomic adventure as well. We feed them all kinds of wonderful food. 2 or 3 days of oral exams. We also get to have meals with colleagues, right? This is my only chance to have a couple of microbiologists on campus, right, to talk to them. And then we also meet our colleagues, examiners, and we have these amazing conversations. In 2020 and 2021, of course, all oral exams were conducted to Zoom, and our department this year did have a Zoom welcome event for our examiners, just to express our gratitude to them about supporting our students. Next slide, please. So each examiner has the responsibility, after the oral exams are done, to enter a mark for each student's performance in whatever they were examined. So for each seminar, the examiner would make a mark for the combined performance on the written and oral exam. And for the thesis, the examiner would make a mark for their performance on writing the thesis, doing the research, and in the oral exam. And the marks are triple H minus, double H plus, double H minus, H plus, H minus, or pass. Normally, when examiners are in person, they meet in a department caucus. So all the biology external examiners who gave any student, either a major or a minor, a biology exam, would meet in a room to perhaps calibrate and then record their marks. No Swarthmore faculty member is in that room. So the person who runs that meeting tends to be an examiner who's come back for a second or third time and is experienced, and they run that meeting. The person who examines theses also gives a grade. There is one grade on a student's transcript that is not given by a Swarthmore faculty member, and that grade is given by the external examiner. It's for the thesis. Then all the examiners and all the faculty go down the hill, and we have lunch in this beautiful dining area. And during lunch, the college registrar crunches all of the numbers, the marks. And he produces a spreadsheet, which I have never seen because no Swarthmore faculty member is allowed to see it, that has the names of all the students on one side and 4 individual marks for each student in each preparation in columns, and then a final average. And in the case where a student has very consistent performance, the average is easy. It's not discussable. But if the student had an uneven preparation, let's say the student had 2 marks of double H and 2 marks of triple H, it could happen. Then those 4 examiners would have to meet together and talk about what the final honorific is going to be. All of this is done. The registrar is present in the room, but none of the faculty are. We're outside the room having dessert and pacing around a little bit like nervous, expectant parents outside of the labor and delivery room, right? We can't know what's really going on in there. So by the end of the all examiner meeting, again, no faculty member is present. The all examiner meeting has a head examiner who runs that meeting. And that is someone who has a lot of experience being an external examiner, and probably also someone who's been a department chair and knows how to kind of manage a whole bunch of faculty who don't know each other. At the end, you as an external examiner don't get to leave that meeting until every student for whom you are responsible has a final honorific mark. Next slide, please. There's a faculty honors coordinator from the faculty, a full professor. That role is appointed by the provost of the college. They are assisted by an honors advisory committee. We go through the honors numbers every year and think about the program. There is a 32-page honors handbook with all kinds of rules and regulations. And of course, I have said that the honors program has undergone 2 renovations, and that renovation has to be fully discussed by the faculty and it requires a faculty vote. So it's not something we don't make any tweaks casually. The integrity of the program is very important to us. Next slide. So who are the examiners? They are experts in the field. I invite microbiologists. Some of them come from other academic institutions, either other four-year colleges or universities. They can be scientists. My examiners can be scientists who work in the United States government. They can be in industry. Up until this year, I never invited anyone from abroad because it was too expensive to fly people in from abroad. But now that we can do things on Zoom, potential lists of examiners can expand. The examiners can be alumni, but usually are not. We don't want to make the program incestuous. They cannot be a formal collaborator of the faculty host. That makes sense. If we're trying to ensure the integrity of what someone teaches, we can't have their buddies and their formal collaborators come and say, oh yeah, sure, this guy's great. Everything he teaches is great. You know, all their students are great. Right. We obviously don't invite competitors. For example, for the Doudna lab, I wanted to make sure the person that I was planning to invite, you know, there wasn't any bad blood between the labs, for the same reason as to protect integrity and reputation. An examiner usually cannot be invited more than 2 years in a row for the same preparation. So I have a seminar that I'm teaching this year. I had 3 seniors in it who were examined for honors. I have a junior, and I'm thinking next year, should I invite her back to examine him again, and should I invite somebody else? I have to make that decision. Under very special circumstances, sometimes someone can be invited for 3 years in a row, but then they can't be invited back for 5 years, because we also don't want our honors program driven by one person on the outside. The integrity of the program and the quality of it is really important. Next slide, please. This is an expensive program. With travel, the program costs the college $1 million a year. Without travel, it's substantially less, and it's not just that. It's the you know, the accommodations and the food and you know, all the festivities that go along with it. But the examiners themselves are paid honoraria for writing an exam, for any additional student who also takes that exam. So if I have, one year I had 7 students in one seminar, and my honors examiner, he was a marathoner, so that was good. He knew he had endurance, but he gave 7 oral exams. Okay. And the head examiner gets an extra stipend. Next slide, please. So what is the impact? So you may recognize Ann Schuchat, certainly in the US, she's quite familiar. She is the Deputy Director of the CDC. She's been very, very, very busy this year. Her claim to fame was she actually solved the first SARS epidemic, realizing the first time it didn't come from a civet cat, but from a bat that had given the virus to a civet. So Ann is one of our very illustrious alumni. She said, when somebody asked her about honors, she said the need to write and present to peers on a weekly basis and tackle complicated issues in a finite period of time is the thing in her toolbox that has allowed her to be such an effective public health official. She was, in fact, a philosophy major who then went to medical school. Frankly, this is kind of off the record, but if I ran the world, everybody would be a philosophy major because you would learn how to think. And then you could take electives in, whatever area of interest you had. I think the training in philosophy is just fantastic. Next slide, please. Here's some other quotes from other alums who were interviewed about the impact of the honors program. The first quote talks about no anonymity, right? You can't hide. So I had 12 students in my seminar. At any given year, some proportion of them are honor students and some proportion of them are just course students, but everybody participates. I don't treat people differently. Everybody participates. You cannot hide. The second quote talks about working in groups and working collaboratively. The thing that's so wonderful about honors is not only do the students collaborate wonderfully with one another, but I also am a co-learner with my students. There is not this adversarial relationship sometimes that happens in the classroom between faculty and students. We're together on this. We're preparing so that the honor students can face their examination. And finally, students develop their own voice as scholars, their own identity as scholars. Walter said it best. It was really satisfying to go through the process of understanding new ideas and then presenting them in my own words, creating their own framework, their own understanding, their own set of scholarly ideas in this field in which they're developing expertise. Next slide, please. I mentally reference honors a lot in my daily life. Students think about the skills they learned, the way to think, how to approach a difficult problem, how to resolve controversy, how to go back to the raw data and form your own opinion and not just swallow what someone else has concluded. All right. These are the tools that we put in their toolbox that they use for their entire lives. Craig Williamson was the former honors coordinator, and he said, when I talk to honors alumni, they say that doing honors was the most important thing they ever did in terms of their work, and that honors graduates are not just academics. They go into all walks of life, and that's certainly the truth. Next slide, please. This is a quote I often mention. It's in some schools when the class is over, the bell rings. But even if the bell doesn't ring, there's a sense of when class is over and everybody starts closing their books or turning off their Zoom or whatever it is and leaving. You can tell the students who are honor students that the conversations continue well after the bell has rung. They linger, they stay. Class is not over yet. Come on, professor, just one more question. We're not done yet. It's astounding. That students would want to stay in class and not fly out the door. Next slide, please. What is the impact on other students? This is, you hear about something that raises all ships, right? Whether a student is an honors or course major, the intellectual ownership, when they take over the material, they're not being fed or presented the material from me. I lay the foundation for what's happening in the field. I maybe tell them a few stories about, well, there's these two camps, and it's really interesting how these two camps arose. And then we just read papers, right? We're preparing together. We're on the same side, preparing for this examination. There are exams from previous years, so you can't go back and use some exam from last year, the year before. They're all available for students to read. And oftentimes, about 2 or 3 weeks into the semester, I will pull out last year's exams and I'll say, now that you have a little bit of experience with the material, take a look at these questions. What can you tell me about them? Even if you can't answer them specifically, at what level are they asking you to think? Right, at a very deep level. And what comes from this way of learning is a camaraderie and a forming of these bonds among students that are way beyond the classroom, way beyond schoolwork. The friendships form around the challenges that students face in these seminars, and a true sense of collaboration. You might think, oh, this might be very competitive. Somebody might try to, sabotage. That just doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. I finished my 32nd year, and I've had more honor students than any other faculty member in biology. I've never seen it happen. It just doesn't happen. Everybody else wants, so the course students will say to me, can we see the exam, right? And I'll say, you can't see the exam until after the students have taken their exam, their written exam. And then they say, oh, can we see the exam now? And I'll show it to them. They go, oh, this was about my paper. Oh, I'm really hoping I prepared them well enough. Everybody wants to be a part of helping the honor students do well. Next slide, please. Yes, the performance of all students is raised. I had one honor seminar with 10 honor students and 2 course students, and it's easily the best course I've ever had. I could have left, and they still would have done exceptionally well. This also prevents me from, everyone's biased, right? We all have our biases. And so it prevents me from teaching this area of microbiology just based on my own bias, right? The external examiner, the external perspective is important. And I get feedback from my examiners, right? When I'm driving them back to the airport, or this year meeting them on Zoom, I'll say, how can I do better? Where are my gaps? Next slide, please. So through our history at Swarthmore, since Frank Adelot started this program, he has worked to ensure the relevance of our content, both historic and current. We receive feedback from examiners, which is it's made my seminar better, all right? And the student experience, individual seminars earn reputations, faculty mentors earn reputations, but as you all know, students kind of vote with their feet. And what happens is it just raises the quality of teaching all over campus. Next slide, please. So some of you may have heard of James Michener. He's a Pulitzer Prize winning author, happens to be one of our distinguished alums. He came to Swarthmore after winning a $2,000 scholarship, and he was from Philadelphia, and was in his class of 100 students in his high school, only 2 went to college. He is known as Swarthmore's first Triple H English honors major. Okay, so he finished his career being Triple H with an English major. And basically, you can see the titles of only some of the books he's written, and I don't know if you've ever read any of them, but they're several hundred pages. He prepared for each of those novels as if he were preparing for an honors exam. That's how he learned to do research. And he said, not one course I took in college has ever been much practical to me, but the system of attack I learned there have been invaluable. He saw conquering an intellectual area of interest as an attack, and he learned to do that in honor seminars at Swarthmore. Next slide, please. All right, so this formally concludes my remarks about the honors program. Peter, do you think I have a few minutes to talk about something else, or should I stop? Or Marcia or Peter, either one of you?
I think that Peter didn't unmute himself. Thank you very, very much for this presentation, Amy. It's of course nice if people can ask me questions. How much more time would you need? Because we are also
well,
very
I just want to give a real quick what I'll do. I have a bunch of slides prepared, but I won't show them all. But I just want to tell you something else that I know is of interest to some people in your audience, and I'm happy to be contacted regarding that. So, Mark, if you would just show the next slide, and then I'll stop. All right. So I know from communication that I've received from World of Talent that one of the other areas of interest in discussing excellence is making sure that we don't exclude people and make that an elitist process. And one of the things I've been working on at Swarthmore in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion is something called the Swarthmore Summer Scholars Program, S3P. We are focused on students who are first in their family to attend college. In the US, we call that first gen. They don't have a familial culture or expectation of what happens in higher education. And in particular, Swarthmore is very quirky. And so you can really feel like you're someone from Venus who's landed on Mars if you are not used to this kind of a atmosphere. Many of the students whom we've been able to recruit to Swarthmore are academically fantastic, but come from low-income families where the secondary schools in their neighborhoods might be under-resourced. So students who've never been in a science lab, for example. And you imagine being a lab partner with someone who participated in the Westinghouse competition, right? And so that disparity can really destabilize an otherwise incredibly intellectually excellent and capable student. They suffer from imposter syndrome. They look around and don't see very many people who look like them, and they wonder if they're an admissions mistake, and they become, and they're also unwilling or afraid to ask for help, and so many of them would then leave STEM. Even though we knew that they were capable, we could see it, you know, but they didn't give us a chance to really support them. And so for the past 8 years, I've been teaching in and now director of the Swarthmore Summer Scholars Program. I have much more to tell you about it, but I don't have time. But I would be so happy to show you my slides and talk to you about them on Zoom in some other way. So I think we'll stop the slides, Mark, at this point, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, Amy. Sorry, I had a problem unmuting myself earlier on. But thank you so much, and especially the combination between, well, the thing you showed at the end, inclusion and diversity, and also the great example of Swarthmore College. Looks like an amazing place. I definitely want to go there once. It really looks like a really vivid environment where you can really pursue your own ideas and chances. I have one question, and maybe some other questions pop up later on. I was wondering because I think, well, the Quakers, for example, I worked at the London School of Economics, which was also founded by the Fabian Society, which is roughly the same ideas. It's really for the betterment of society and things like that, that train people and also in the honors program, because is there a direct connection to society, for example? I mean, you do your majors, you specialize in something, you read academic text, but is there a societal component impact-wise? So are you being judged or marked based on your potential impact for society?
You know, that's a very interesting question, Peter. It's not deliberate in any way. We don't have a box that we check that says that. But I will tell you, I made a very conscious decision to teach at the undergraduate level only, right? I could have gone to a university where there's a department of microbiology. I could have been surrounded by people who did microbiology. And one of the reasons I chose to teach at a small college, and one with a mission of helping society, is I think teaching science just as science is kind of in a vacuum. That if you don't have applications, if you don't think about both the good and the harm that could be done by a particular technique. For example, CRISPR now that we have from the Doudna lab, we have this ability to knock out genes or to go in and repair genes. So just because we can doesn't mean we should, right? And so I think it would be hard to find a class at Swarthmore where that doesn't come into the conversation. Even if the faculty member hasn't thought about it. Let's say the faculty member says, I'm an organic chemist. I'm just going to teach about organic reactions, right? That's my job. It wouldn't surprise me at all if in reading papers, published by organic chemists, the students wouldn't say, oh, I looked this guy up. He refused to work on munitions development because he was, so our students bring it in. Even if the student is a chemistry major and a biology minor, you have to take the majority of your classes outside of your major at Swarthmore. That's a requirement.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a culture of societal engagement or so.
Right. And so the students themselves, we tend to attract students who already are thinking about this. And as the conversations happen on campus, all students really gain this conscience about, well, just because we can doesn't mean we should. So I thank you for asking that. There is not an articulated criterion about honors for this, but I just feel like the curriculum itself is designed in a way, and the community itself has discussions in a way that you can't avoid it. You just can't avoid it.
I can also imagine, looking at your presentation, that maybe on the other side, on the evaluation part of it, if you bring in people from government or industry, maybe they're intrinsically also focused on things like that, right? Elements like that. So looking at the academic work and maybe the societal work. So maybe it's in there intrinsically or so.
Well, and Peter, I don't know what happens during that oral exam. I have no idea how much time they spend on the technical stuff and the techniques and the data, and how many times, I know toward the end of an honors exam, the honors examiner will say to the student, so what are you going to do next year, right? And the student says, well, I'm going to Teach for America, and then I'm going to apply to graduate school, right? Oh, well, what is Teach for America? So again, those are private conversations. I have no idea. I do hear from the examiners later and say, oh my gosh, Amy, your students are great. They're so mature and they're so thoughtful and they want to do good, and I know that. It's nice it's just like hearing from somebody that your children are well-mannered. It's still nice to hear.
Yeah, exactly.
if you know it. So one little piece of data I don't think I pointed out is that there's one interesting fact is that people who come as honors examiners, a high proportion of them encourage their kids to apply to Swarthmore, because they say, well, where I teach or where I went to school, they don't get this kind of instruction. I want my kids to apply to Swarthmore.
Yeah.
Not surprising.
Yeah. Are there any other questions?
And I'm happy to be contacted privately. I used my email in my first slide, and you can find me at Swarthmore. Just look up microbiology at Swarthmore, you'll find me. I'm so happy to have been invited and to tell you about a program I think is, it's a test for us, right? I told you, if all of my students failed, I'm the one who failed, right? Or if students who take my seminar tell the next class of students, don't take that seminar, it's impossible, right? And I don't have any enrollment next year, that will also give me feedback that that's not a good course. So it really preserves the integrity. Yes, the system promotes excellence for teachers and students, and we continue to adapt, right? I can't offer the same exact thing every year, right? I have to keep growing with my field because I'm inviting people who are in the field so that, the papers that we read 10 years ago are not going to be the papers we read next year. There may be a few classics, but not the new work. Yeah.
And what also struck me, because I was looking at the website, basically at the faculty and their interests, is that they're really, it feels like people can really pursue their own ideas and really free. So that could also help in a transdisciplinary way to come up with new ideas, right?
Oh, absolutely. So I taught a bioethics course with a philosopher. He was an ethicist and I was a biotechnology person, and we taught together. I learned the most from that course ever, right? But I also do interdisciplinary research with engineers, I have an animal physiology colleague. We studied the gut microbiome of hummingbirds. Turns out they're quite unique, right? So these are not things that I think I would have done if I had taken a job in a research university.
Yeah.
I think I've had more, I've taken more intellectual risks as a scholar myself. And I think the atmosphere of the college has encouraged that.
Yeah.
May I ask a question as well?
Yes.
Yes. So thank you very, very much for your very interesting presentation.
You're welcome.
Yeah, very insightful. Thank you. I have two questions, to be honest. The first is that I know that Franklin Adeloyd, he said that to enter the honors program, the leadership qualities of the students would be very important, and also the way, for instance, they would be in sports. So in that time, so I'm curious how selection is organized now, and if leadership qualities already in the at the selection procedure do play a role, and if you have also external people included in the selection, the recruitment and selection of students.
No, the external people are not involved in anything except the exam at the end. I think different departments have different criteria that they're looking for in terms of honors quality. Certainly there's a GPA minimum, but there's other qualities that we look at, including kind of taking the initiative, which I would consider being part of a leadership suite of skills. Here's the way I describe honors to my students. I say honors students are the first people to arrive and the last people to leave, right? You're not just doing the minimum. Right. You're going above and beyond. And I think honors students, we used to have lab projects as part of honors, and the honors students, you know, sometimes experiments fail, right? That's part of science. 90% of them fail. And some students would just go, okay, and wash their hands and leave. And the honors students would stick around and go, okay, if we're going to do this again, we're going to need to do this again. We need this much more time, you know, and they would do it again. They would not be satisfied. They would persevere. So I think those qualities that you're talking about, leadership, are really important. In my experience, we have a lot of sports on campus. I had one honors seminar that met on a Friday afternoon. I had to reschedule it because I had 4 team captains in that seminar, and they all had to have away games and get ready to go, you know. And so I said, you know what, let's meet, you know, Monday night instead. Because they were so amazing. Did it surprise me that the leaders in the classroom are the leaders on the field and on the court? No, never. I've never been surprised by that. The students who use athletics as an excuse to leave lab early or something like that, when I go watch the sports, and I go watch, they're not the starters. They're the bench warmers. They're second team, third team. So the same qualities we're looking at, all right, the same skills and competencies that we admire in academic scholarship are no different. You know, the daily practice, the discipline, the thoroughness, you know, not making excuses, helping others, right? Stopping to help others, because when you help someone and you teach them that concept, you learn it better yourself, right? They're all consistent. They're all consistent. There's no difference. There's really no difference. It's a different environment, but you're looking for those same qualities, those same characteristics, whether they're honed in the athletic arena or they're honed in the classroom. Thank you for asking that.
And one other thing about the external examination. I heard you say that you learn a lot about it yourself and your teaching will improve. Do you also think that students are more easy in sharing their failures, and also more easy in sharing the process of their learning or of their personal development, knowing that you are not the one giving the assessment?
Yes, exactly. And I also think that when they think of themselves as being part of this massive process that's such a tradition, right? It's it's not just, one more achievement feather in their cap, right, which is oftentimes the initial motivation, but they really appreciate the tradition, the shoulders they stand on, if you will, and that a few of them will one day return as honors examiners. And I remember a former student I saw, he wasn't my examiner, he was doing an examination for biochemistry. I saw him across the room. He was sitting at the chemistry table for lunch, and we were at the biology table, and I waved him, and he waved back, and he walked over, and I said, look at you, you're an examiner. And he goes, I know, I became the thing I feared. But he said, Amy, it's such an honor for me to be invited back to do this. And so it was really fun to see him. So yeah, I think when you feel like you're part of something that's much larger than you or your 4 years at an institution, it takes on a different sense entirely. And I think by the time students are seniors, they really realize that and are grateful for the process. It is stressful. They're pushed hard. I'm not saying they go skipping around saying, oh, yay, happy, I'm an honor student. But when they walk out of their oral exams, they all have big smiles on their face. They will say, that wasn't an exam, that was a conversation. And it was a conversation with someone for whom, at least at the time, I felt like I was an equal. And that's quite something to have prepared for that.
Thank you so much. Do you have any other questions? No, I think we're nearly there. I think, most people also in the chat are also talking about the external evaluation. I think that's a really good thing for us as institutions to take on board. It's an amazing thing. I think, I want to thank you again so much for your beautiful and elaborate presentation. I think it really enlightened us and gave us an overview of basically what you've been doing at Swarthmore. And
thank you so much. I really hope I have a chance to meet some of the members of the community in person someday. I don't think we're that far away from one another.